So the OCG ban list came out and they banned Imperial Order. That's to be expected. And Verte, who finally got banned, as well as Fusion Destiny gets unbanned only after one format. Huh, interesting. I guess I was somewhat right. For those who don't know, I made a Fusion Destiny theory video where I thought they would errata Fusion Destiny, then do all of this stuff, but I guess Konami's doing it a different way, which I can understand. Their plan is to limit Fusion Destiny so that now you can't consistently draw it, making the engine more bricky, and with Verte banned, you can't access it from the deck. Will this work? Well, only time will tell. When it comes to Verte, my biggest problem is that he constantly makes these fusion engines more accessible and easier to use. In my Verte video, I guess I failed to mention this because I'm assuming that some people didn't like some of my arguments or they hated my condescending tone in the video. But when people say that Verte is balanced, they blame the fusion spells, and for me, I thought that at first when Verte first came out, but now I don't agree with that. These days, Konami needs to add power creep into their fusion spells if they want people to play fusions. Here, look at Branded Fusion as an example. Before that card came out, Despia was okay, but they needed this card to exist so that they can be good. Now look at them, they're one of the top tier decks in the meta, and it's all because of Branded Fusion. This card is a good example of you need to add power creep into your fusion spells if you want people to play fusions. Now compare this card to B-Trooper Landing. Why did this card flop? Well, it's just because it's your average poly, and that's not good enough in today's Yu-Gi-Oh! Which is why nobody even plays the fusions in B-Troopers. If this card sent from the deck to the graveyard, maybe people would have played it because it could send things like Resonance Insect to the graveyard, but I don't know. To me, Landing is an example of what not to do with your fusion spells since there is no power creep in it, which is why it flopped, proving my overall point that you need to add power creep in your fusion spells if you want people to play fusions. Also, Konami does add restrictions to these fusion spells to make them balanced, and yeah, some of them might end up being broken, but still. Back in the day, no one would ever fusion summon a monster using a fusion spell. They would cheat them out of the extra deck with cards like Cyberstein, Magical Scientist, and Metamorphosis, which is why they started adding power creep into the fusion spells so people can properly fusion summon monsters. But when it comes to Verte, as I mentioned before, no matter how many restrictions Konami puts on these fusion spells, Verte will just ignore them and make these fusion engines more accessible to use. That's just my personal problem with Verte. Hopefully the TCG will follow through. Maybe on our next ban list, but we'll see. The next biggest hits were the limitations of Water Enchantress and Rite of Arsamir to the Adventure engine, and I gotta be honest, although this should kill the engine, to me, it also kills the Adventurer deck by itself. Their main card, Rite of Arsamir, is now at 1, and their Searcher is now at 1, making this deck very unplayable and bricky. Hell, they didn't even get any new support in Power of the Elements. I kind of feel bad for Adventurer, but this is something that had to be done. And I do wonder what the TCG is going to do when it's time to hit this engine. Will they go down this route, or will they do something different, like, I don't know, ban the Griffin? I guess we'll have to wait and find out. One last thing, when is the TCG list coming out? I'm going to assume that just like the OCG, we'll get ours in April because whenever the OCG releases their ban list, ours comes in the same month. And I'm going to assume that they're going down this 2020 route where they gave us a ton of ban lists during that year, but we'll just have to wait and see. Anyways, that's all I have to say about this subject. Have a good day, folks.